Frank did not want Amy to come to the reunion. He said it more than once that week. "You don't even know half these people anymore," he told her. "You'll be bored. Just stay home." But Amy had not been out of the house in a long time, not to see old friends, not to talk to anyone who wasn't a child or a grocery store cashier. So she asked him again, softly, one more time. "Please, Frank, I just want to see people. I won't stay long." He finally said fine, but he didn't sound happy about it. At the reunion, string lights hung across Diane and Paul's backyard, and a long table sat under them, full of food everyone had brought. Old classmates hugged each other and laughed about things from years ago. When Amy walked in beside Frank, one man someone Frank used to play football with turned around, surprised. "Wait, is that Amy?" he said, looking at Frank first. "Not her. Didn't you tell me she was out of town this weekend? You said she wasn't coming." Frank laughed too fast, the kind of laugh people use to cover something up. "Oh yeah, no. Her trip got moved. Last minute thing. She's here now though." He put an arm around Amy like that would make the sentence disappear. Amy stood there and said nothing, but she heard it. She understood in that one small moment that her husband had already told people she wasn't coming before she'd even asked to come. It made her wonder how long he had been planning to leave her at home. She smiled anyway, because she didn't want to make a scene in someone else's backyard. A little later, some of the other classmates had brought their own children along, and all the kids ran off together toward the swing set at the back of the yard. Tom, Ben, and Jack went with them, laughing, chasing each other in the grass. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then Ben tripped over a tree root and started crying, holding his knee. Frank was in the middle of a conversation, laughing loudly about some old high school memory, and didn't notice at first. It was one of the other dads who nudged him. "Hey, I think your boy's hurt." Frank turned, saw Ben crying, and sighed like it was an inconvenience. "I got it," he muttered, walking over slowly, the way someone walks when they don't really want the job. He crouched down next to Ben, unsure what to do, patting his shoulder stiffly. "You're fine, get up." A few feet away, another father, someone from their old class, was already down on both knees with his own daughter, checking her hands, wiping her tears, talking to her softly until she calmed down and ran off smiling again. Amy watched the difference between the two men without meaning to. Nobody said anything about it, but she saw it. And so did some of the other guests. Later, at the table, Diane asked Amy how she managed 3 boys the same age. "Honestly," Amy said, "most days I'm just following them around, cleaning up whatever they leave behind." "Some days that's the whole job," Diane laughed. "She's being modest." Frank cut in, grinning at everyone around the table. "She's basically a full-time referee now, though these days she referees the fridge just as hard. Am I right?" A few people laughed, not quite sure if it was really a joke. Diane's smile faded just a little. Amy laughed too, a small, quick laugh, the kind you use so people don't see what's really happening on your face. Under the table, her hands were shaking, not from anger, from the old, tired feeling of being made small in front of people and having to smile through it anyway. She stood up before anyone could notice. "I'll go help clear some plates," she said, and walked toward the kitchen before her voice could betray her. Inside, alone, she saw the trays of food stacked by the sink barely touched. More than 30 people could ever finish. She told herself she was only tidying up. Then she picked up a fork. She wasn't hungry. She knew that, even as she took the first bite, standing with her back to the door, eating fast and quiet, like she was stealing a few minutes that belonged only to her. "Oh my gosh, Amy?" She turned around. Wendy Ferris, someone 2 years behind them in school, stood in the doorway with her phone already lifted, camera pointed right at her, mid-bite. "Wendy, please don't," Amy said, setting the fork down too quickly, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Relax, it's funny, Wendy said, already typing. You're basically guarding these leftovers like a security guard. Wendy, I mean it, please don't post that. But it was already posted to the old class group chat, over 40 people, with some joke of a caption underneath. Amy stood there, helpless, watching Wendy's phone light up again and again with replies coming in fast. By the time she walked back outside, half the yard already knew. Someone showed Frank the photo before she even reached him. She watched his face take it in. Then she watched him laugh. Not a nervous laugh. Not an uncomfortable one. He laughed the easy way he laughed at his own jokes, like none of it cost him anything at all. Frank. What? It's funny, come on, he said, still grinning, the phone glowing between them. She didn't say another word until they were in the car.
You laughed.
In
front of everyone.
She said quietly, once they had pulled out of the driveway.
Relax.
In front of everyone,
I begged her not
at
to
me.
post it. You laughed
It
anyway.
was just a joke,
You're
Amy.
being dramatic.
Relax.
It's one photo.
I begged her not to post it. You laughed anyway. You're being dramatic. It's one photo. It's never just one photo with you, Frank. It's never just one thing. His voice rose. Hers rose to match it. Just once, just enough. In the back seat, Tom, Ben, and Jack, 4 years old, now reached up and covered their own ears without anyone telling them to. Amy had taught them that months ago, kneeling down after another hard night, saying quietly, when mommy and daddy are having a hard talk, you cover your ears, okay? It's not your job to listen. They remembered 3 small hands, 3 covered pairs of ears, while the argument kept going up front, and neither parent noticed what their own child had just done. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, you're going to want to stay for this one. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe and tap that bell. This channel is all about real stories of betrayal, comparison, and the moments that finally force the truth into the open. You won't want to miss how this one unfolds. 3 years before any of this, Amy Whitlock was the best marketing coordinator her firm in Denver had ever had. Not assisted, not supported, the best. Clients asked for her by name. People used her first name like it meant something. Ask Amy, she'll know. Amy always knows. She wore blazers that fit her exactly right. She was sharp, funny in meetings, the person younger hires wanted to be. She met Frank at a marketing conference downtown, back when he still asked good questions and actually listened to the answers. At dinner that first night, he asked her, half joking, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing instead? She laughed and told him about sewing, how she taught herself on her grandmother's old machine as a teenager, still made little things for friends whenever she found the time. It was just a hobby, something she mentioned casually, but it stuck with him. They dated for 2 years before he asked her to move with him to build a life together, his hometown, a fresh start, a house with a yard. Once they were married and settled in, Frank sat her down one evening and told her plainly what he wanted. A wife who stayed home, took care of the house, and raised their children herself. That was it. That was the whole reasoning, not distrust of anyone else, just his belief that this was simply how a home should run. A man works, a woman stays home and takes care of everything inside it. He didn't see it as taking anything away from her. In his mind, he was offering her something. I'll pay you myself, he told her, like a real salary. And I'll get you a sewing machine too, a good one, so you've got something of your own to do in between, maybe even make a little extra on the side. Sell a few things if you want. He said it like it solved everything, like a machine and a monthly deposit could stand in for the career she'd spent years building. It was never her dream, but she loved him, and marriage meant compromise, and the offer sounded like security instead of a warning sign. So she agreed. The salary showed up on time for the first 6 months. The sewing machine did not. He mentioned it every few weeks, at first this weekend. I'll order it this weekend, until the weekends turned into months. And the machine became one of those promises that lived permanently in the future tense. It was almost a year before he finally brought one home, already a little dusty from sitting in the back of someone's garage sale. And by then, Amy had 3 tiny reasons why she barely had 10 free minutes to use it anyway. Still, he had kept paying her that whole time, right up until the excuses about the business started proof, at least for a while, that some promises got kept slower than others. And some didn't get kept at all. They hadn't planned on triplets. Amy had pictured one baby, a nursery, painted one color, one crib, one small voice to learn. What she got instead, the day the doctor pointed to the screen and said 3 heartbeats, knocked the wind out of her in a way she never fully told anyone about. She wasn't ready. She hadn't planned for this. And there was no undoing it now, only the slow, terrifying math of turning one set of hands into 3 sets of everything. Nobody warned her about the 2 years that followed. The exhaustion never lifted because it never had the chance to. 3 babies meant 3 different sleep schedules that never once lined up, which meant Amy was always awake for somebody. She'd get one boy down only to hear another start crying, and by the time she'd rocked him back to sleep, the first one was awake again. Whole nights disappeared like that, not one bad night, but hundreds of them, stacked one on top of the other for 2 straight years, until she couldn't remember what a full night's sleep even felt like anymore. Somewhere in there, a voice in her head started repeating things she'd absorbed her whole life without ever questioning them. A mother is supposed to be strong. A mother is supposed to handle this. A mother doesn't complain, so she didn't. She wanted, some days, more than anything, to have one person just ask her how she was really doing, not how the boys were doing, not whether they'd eaten, just her. Nobody did. So she kept it inside, and food became the one thing available at 2 in the morning that asked nothing of her and gave a little comfort back. Her body changed over those 2 years. Her hips, her stomach, the mirror telling her a story she didn't recognize. She knew why. Nobody else ever asked. They only ever commented on what they saw, never on the 2 years of no sleep and no help underneath it. Most nights followed the same pattern. One of the boys would start crying somewhere in the dark hours, and Frank, still half asleep beside her, would reach over and tap her shoulder without even opening his eyes. Amy, baby's crying. She'd lie there a second longer, hoping it would stop on its own, knowing it wouldn't. Then she'd drag herself up, eyes barely open, legs heavy, and go to whichever crib needed her that night. Some nights, it happened 2-3 times before sunrise. And some nights, when she was too tired to even get the words out kindly, she'd reach over and tap him back. Frank, please, can you get this one? I just did the last one. You don't have work in the morning, he'd mumble, already turning back over. It's not a big deal. Women have been having babies forever. This is nothing new. He never said it cruelly, exactly. He said it like a fact, like something everyone already agreed on, like her tiredness didn't count as real tiredness because it happened at home instead of an office. And every time he said it, she got up anyway because someone had to, and it was never going to be him. It happened on an ordinary evening, in their own front yard, and that was somehow what made it worse. Brenda was outside watering her flower beds when Frank came home from work, still in his work clothes, briefcase in hand. She waved him over, friendly the way she always was, and started telling him about a piece of land near the edge of town she and Gordon were thinking of buying, talking easily, confidently, using the kind of language that made whatever she was saying sound important, gesturing toward the horizon like she could already see the house that wasn't built yet. Frank stood there a little longer than he needed to. He nodded along, laughed at the right moments, watched the way she tucked her hair back without even noticing herself doing it, watched how put together she looked at the end of a long day when most people looked worn out by then. Amy, watching from the porch with Ben on her hip, saw the whole thing not because anything happened, but because of the way Frank looked at her, like she was something worth paying attention to. By the time he came inside, Amy was sitting in the armchair in the living room, completely still, the kind of still that comes from having nothing left to give. Her hair was pulled back the same way it had been for 3 days straight. She hadn't changed out of the shirt she'd spilled something on that morning. She was just sitting there, eyes half closed, letting herself exist for one quiet minute before one of the boys needed something again. Frank looked at her the way you look at something you're disappointed in. "You know Brenda's got the same number of kids as you," he said, setting his briefcase down. "Same age even. Look at her. Runs her whole house. Still looks put together at the end of the day. Smells nice. Talks like she's got somewhere to be." He shook his head slowly, "And then I come home to this." Amy didn't answer right away. "I'm not asking for much," he went on. "I just don't get it. You think you were the first woman in the world to have kids, the way you carry on. Every other woman figures it out." Something in Amy wanted to answer him. She wanted to tell him about the whole day, the spilled cup, the tantrum before nap time, the load of laundry she still hadn't finished, the fact that she couldn't remember the last time she'd looked at her own face in the mirror for longer than it took to brush her teeth. But none of it came out. Her throat just closed around all of it, and she sat there instead, silent, blinking hard, because if she opened her mouth right then, she knew it wouldn't be words that came out. He didn't wait for an answer anyway. He just picked his briefcase back up and walked toward the kitchen, already done with the conversation, already forgetting he'd said anything at all. That night, once the house was finally quiet, Amy stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long moment before bed. She looked at herself carefully, like she was trying to find someone she used to know. She couldn't. The woman in the mirror was tired in a way that went past her face, past her eyes, tired in a way she didn't have a name for yet. She turned the light off before she had to look any longer, and got into bed beside a husband who was already asleep, having no idea what he'd left behind in that living room. A few weeks later, the church held its annual Children's Day program, the kind of Sunday where every kid in the congregation gets dressed up, recites a verse or sings in the choir, and every parent shows up whether they want to or not. Amy ran into Brenda properly that day, really talked. Not just a wave across the yard while their boys and girls fidgeted in matching outfits up front, waiting for their turn. "You looked exhausted the other evening," Brenda said gently, standing beside Amy near the back pews. "When Frank and I were talking outside. Are you doing okay?" "I'm fine, just tired. 3 boys, you know how it is." "I do," Brenda said, laughing a little. "Honestly, I don't know how anyone does it without help. Gordon's on lunch duty Tuesdays and Thursdays, and he does bedtime most nights, so I can actually sit down for 10 minutes. Amy blinked. "Gordon does bedtime. Every night he's home. We just split it. Whoever has more in the tank that day does more. It's not even a thing, we just do it." "Doesn't he ever get tired of it?" Amy asked, half joking, testing the idea out loud. "Sometimes. I get tired of it too. That's kind of the point, we take turns being the tired one." Brenda shrugged, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I couldn't do it if it was just me. Nobody could, honestly. I don't know how you're managing 3 on your own most days." "I don't really have a choice." Brenda's smile faltered, just slightly, like she'd heard something underneath the sentence she wasn't sure she was supposed to hear. "You always have a choice," she said gently, "even if it doesn't feel like it right now." Amy smiled and said something polite, something about being fine, and changed the subject before it could go any further. But something in her chest quietly cracked open on the walk home. For the first time, she understood the woman Frank held up as the standard wasn't doing this alone. She had a partner who took his turn being tired. Amy had a husband keeping score of everything she failed to be, and never once asking what she needed to get there. That night, still trying, Amy climbed into bed next to Frank, hoping for 5 quiet minutes of just being married. "You're always tired," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "Every night, same thing. No energy, no interest. You know that's how marriages fall apart, right? That's how men start looking elsewhere." "Frank, I'm overwhelmed. I'm doing everything alone all day." "Everybody's got excuses." He turned off the lamp on his side. "I'm going to the guest room. I've got an early morning." She lay there in the dark, alone, and quietly wiped her eyes before she let herself fall asleep. Frank noticed the pattern too, in his own way, not the reason behind it, just the fact of it. He started commenting on how often takeout containers showed up in the trash, how the grocery money never seemed to stretch as far as it should. His solution wasn't to ask her why. It was to quietly cut back what he gave her each week, the same way he decided everything else about their household from the beginning. "You don't need extra for all that fast food anyway," he said one evening, sliding a smaller amount across the counter than usual. "Might as well save it. Better for you, probably." He said it like he was doing her a favor. Amy didn't argue. She just did the math in her head, quietly, the way she'd learned to do with everything else. Less money meant fewer chances to reach for anything, sweet or otherwise, right when she needed some kind of comfort most. She tried to turn it into something good. She started buying what real groceries she could afford instead, telling herself she'd eat healthier, cook simple meals the way she used to before the boys, prove to herself, if no one else, that she didn't need what Frank assumed she needed. Most days, she managed it. The sewing machine sat untouched in the corner of the bedroom through most of this too. There was never a real block of time to sit down and use it, not with 3 boys needing her every few minutes, and without it, she had one less place to put her hands when the heaviness came. But some nights, the craving came anyway, sharp and specific, for something exactly like the meals she used to allow herself, and with barely enough left in her weekly amount to justify it. Getting something at all felt like a small defeat before she'd even ordered it. She'd sit in the drive-through line some evenings, telling herself to turn around and go through with it anyway. She'd eat it fast, in the car, before she got home, like it wouldn't count if no one saw it happen. Nobody did see it happen. That was the whole problem. Frank had found what looked like a fixed smaller problem in his mind without ever once wondering what was actually driving it, or asking her how she was really doing underneath all of it. She still wrote to-do lists in the mornings, hoping to claw back 10 minutes for herself between chores. Some days, she managed a quick set of exercises in the backyard with a pair of old dumbbells while the boys played nearby. Most days, a diaper emergency or a meltdown over breakfast ate the 10 minutes whole. She never stopped trying. She never stopped loving them, even on the days loving them cost her everything she had left. Hank, the retired firefighter, 2 houses down, who jogged the same loop every morning, noticed her constantly hanging laundry before 7, chasing 3 boys across the yard, hauling groceries up the driveway alone. "You're doing an incredible job over there," he told her one morning, slowing his jog to a walk. "Remind me of my mother. She raised 5 of us basically solo. Just remember to take care of you too, alright?" Amy smiled and thanked him, and kept moving. The one person whose noticing might have actually changed something still hadn't looked up from his phone long enough to see it. Weeks after the bridge, the exhaustion finally won. Amy woke up one morning and couldn't stand without the room tilting sideways. She tried anyway, made it as far as the hallway before her legs simply stopped listening to her, and Frank found her on the floor outside the boys' room. At the hospital, Dr. Hale didn't sugarcoat it. "This isn't just being tired," she said, looking between Frank and the chart. Months of physical exhaustion, poor nutrition, and what looks like untreated postpartum depression that's gone unaddressed far too long. Her body finally said no. She needs complete rest, no cooking, no cleaning, no lifting those boys for at least a week. I want to see her back here in 7 days to reassess. If there's no real improvement by then, we may be looking at a longer hospital stay. Frank nodded along, already doing the math in his head. A week, he could survive a week. He didn't understand yet that the number the doctor gave him wasn't a formality. It was a deadline with real teeth. That evening, the boys climbed carefully onto the hospital bed. Tom rubbed her feet without being asked. Ben held her hand and wouldn't let go. Jack called up against her side, silent, watching her face for any sign that she wasn't going to be okay. "I'm fine, sweethearts," she whispered, even though she wasn't sure that was true yet. Day 1. Frank's alarm went off, and for the first time in 4 years, nobody got up before it to start the coffee. He stumbled downstairs to 3 boys already awake and starving, and stood in the kitchen for a full minute, just staring at the pantry like it might explain itself. He burned the eggs. He put Tom's lunch in Ben's bag and Ben's lunch in Jack's, and didn't realize until the school called at 11, asking why Ben had 2 peanut butter sandwiches and Tom had none. Mommy packs them with the fruit on the side, Jack informed him at breakfast, not squished on top. Mommy knows the shoes go by the door, not under the couch, Tom added. "I'm aware," Frank said, though he clearly hadn't been. 5 minutes earlier, on his hands and knees under the couch. Day 2, he forgot the school pickup entirely. Got a call at 4:40 from a very unimpressed office administrator informing him his sons were the last 3 kids left in the building, again, and this was becoming a pattern. He apologized 4 times in 90 seconds and drove there so fast he ran a yellow light he definitely shouldn't have. Day 3. He fell asleep at his desk at work, in the middle of a client call, because he'd been up until 1 in the morning trying to figure out why the washing machine kept beeping and eventually just unplugging it out of frustration. His boss didn't say anything, but the look on his face said plenty. That same afternoon, Hank jogged past and found Frank standing in the driveway staring at a laundry basket like it had personally wronged him. "Rough one?" Hank asked, slowing to a walk. "I don't understand how she does all this and still smiles at dinner." Hank laughed, not unkindly. "Took you 4 years to ask that question. She's been answering it every single day." He nodded at the basket. "Darks and lights separate, by the way. Learned that one the expensive way myself, years back." Frank looked down at the basket, now a uniform shade of dishwater gray, and said nothing. Day 4. Bedtime became a war. Jack wouldn't sleep without a specific song Frank didn't know the words to. Ben needed the hallway light at exactly 1/3 brightness, a setting Frank did not know existed, and spent 10 minutes trying to locate on a dimmer switch that turned out to just be a lamp with 3 settings. Tom simply refused to brush his teeth on principle, and by the time Frank finally got all 3 down, it was nearly 10, and he sat on the stairs afterward with his head in his hands, muttering to himself, not fully realizing what was coming out of his mouth. "It's not hard," he said quietly, to no one.
"It's not hard.
You had one job.
You had one
Don't
job.
tell me you can't even manage
Don't
that."
tell me you can't even manage
He stopped. Something about the sentence sounded familiar in a way that made his stomach turn. He didn't chase the thought any further that night. He just went to bed. Day 5. He visited Amy at the hospital, boys in tow, and after they'd hugged her goodnight and gone to wait with a nurse in the hallway, he stood alone at her bedside while she slept under her medication. "I can't keep doing this,"
I can't keep doing
he said
this.
quietly,
The
to a
house is
woman
falling
who
apart.
couldn't hear him.
The boys won't
The
listen to
house
me.
is falling
Work
apart.
thinks I'm losing
The
it.
boys won't
I need you to
listen
get better,
me.
Amy. I need
Work
you to come
thinks I'm
home.
losing it.
2 more
I need
days
you
until
to
your
get
appointment.
better.
I don't know what happens if
Amy,
the doctor says you
I
need to
need
stay
you
longer.
to
I
come
don't know how
home.
I do this without
He rubbed
you.
his face with both hands. 2 more days until your appointment. I don't know what happens if the doctor says you need to stay longer. I don't know how I do this without you. He didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't say I understand now. He just needed the machine to start running again without once asking what it had cost her to run it alone for 4 years. A nurse passed the doorway, glanced in, and kept walking, the way people do when a scene looks tender from a distance and isn't up close tender at all. Day 6. The house was chaos before noon. All 3 boys packed in front of the TV, fighting over which cartoon to watch, the volume climbing every time one of them lost the remote to another. Frank had a headache building behind his eyes, and a World Cup match he badly wanted to watch in peace. After 10 minutes of trying to negotiate a truce over the remote and losing, he gave up, grabbed his keys, and walked across the street to Gordon and Brenda's, half expecting to find Gordon sprawled on the couch with the game already on, Brenda somewhere in the background, handling dinner and homework alone. Proof, finally, that somebody else had it easier. Instead, he found Gordon at the kitchen table, helping their daughter with spelling words, a pot on the stove behind him, laundry folded in a basket by the door. The TV in the other room wasn't even on yet. "You do all this?" Frank asked, genuinely stunned. Gordon laughed, not unkindly. "Every night I'm home, yeah. Brenda and I just split it. Whoever's got more energy that day picks up more. She's talking about a piece of land she wants us to buy, something she's wanted for years. I can't exactly ask her to carry the whole house and shelve everything else she wants for herself. That's not a marriage, that's just one person's life running 2 people's problems." Frank sat with that in silence longer than he meant to. "I thought you had it easier than me," he finally said. "I don't have it easier," Gordon said. "I just don't do it alone." He set down the spelling flashcards and looked at Frank properly. "You okay? You look like you haven't slept in a week." "Amy's been in the hospital. I've had the boys by myself." Gordon winced. "That'll do it. How's she doing?" "Follow-ups tomorrow. They'll decide if she needs to stay longer." Frank looked down at his hands. "I keep thinking this is 1 week. She did this every single day for 4 years, and I didn't even notice." Gordon didn't say anything triumphant or smug. He just nodded slowly, like a man who'd learned the same lesson a long time ago and was glad someone else was finally catching up. Better late than never, man, but only if you actually do something with it. Somewhere in the other room, the game finally started, the sound of the crowd roaring faintly through the TV. Neither of them moved to go watch it yet. Something in Frank's chest gave way completely. He walked back across the street in silence, Gordon's words looping in his head. He let himself into the quiet house, no boys yet, still with his mother for one more night, and stood in front of the framed photo from their wedding day, Amy laughing at something just off camera. Before 3 kids and 4 years and 100 careless comments had worn her down. He hadn't been comparing his wife to Brenda. He'd been comparing 2 entirely different marriages and blaming Amy for the difference his own absence had created. He sat down at the kitchen table and cried, quietly, for the first time since he could remember, not because he'd been caught, but because he finally understood what he'd cost her. Day 7, before Amy's follow-up appointment, Frank cleaned the entire house himself, top to bottom. He cooked her favorite meal, the one she used to make for herself back when she had time to have favorites. He bought flowers, wrote a letter he tore up twice before finishing, and picked her up from the hospital himself, carrying her bag, opening her door. Dr. Hale reviewed her numbers, her color, her rest. "Better," she said. "Not there yet, but better. Keep this up." When Amy walked into the house and saw what he'd done, she noticed all of it, the flowers, the clean floors, the letter waiting on the counter, but she didn't collapse into his arms. She simply said, "Thank you, I'm tired, I want to rest first," and walked past him toward the bedroom. He tried to apologize right there. She gently stopped him. "Not today, Frank. He understood finally that this wasn't going to be fixed with one gesture, however sincere. Trust doesn't rebuild on flowers. It rebuilds on Tuesdays that keep going right after the flowers are gone. That night, once she was ready, he sat down and just listened, really listened, without interrupting, for what felt like the first time in their marriage. She told him everything. The postpartum depression she never had a name for until Dr. Hill said it out loud. The night's food was the only comfort available at 2 in the morning. The flower farm she'd quietly stopped letting herself think about, because dreaming about it just made the reality hurt more. There were so many times I wanted to tell you how overwhelmed I was, she said, but every time I tried, it turned into criticism or comparison or complaints, so I stopped trying. She told him something he hadn't considered once in 6 years. You paid for everything, the rent, the groceries, the bills, but you never once set aside anything for me. Any extra always went to the boys first, because that's what mothers do. New shoes, school supplies, whatever they needed. I couldn't spend grocery money on my hair or new clothes when Tom needed cleats. She looked at him steadily. How exactly was I supposed to look like Diane when she had time, help, and money set aside for herself, and I was stretching every dollar just to keep us standing? He opened his mouth twice before anything came out. I didn't know it was that tight. You never asked. I thought I don't know what I thought. That it worked itself out. That you just handled it. Because you always handled everything. That's exactly the problem, Frank. You built an entire idea of me around what I handled and never once wondered what it cost me to handle it. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was just tired and steady and finally honest. I'm not asking you to feel guilty forever. I'm asking you to actually see me. That's all I ever wanted. He had no answer for that, not a good one anyway. The hardest part wasn't the housework, she said. It was feeling completely unseen. Believing I was failing at being a wife and a mother at the same time, and nobody ever once asked if I needed help. You just kept score of what I wasn't. He listened. He didn't defend himself. When she finished, he said the only true thing he had left. I'm not going to just say sorry and go back to how things were. I'm going to prove it. Every day, not just this week. He kept his word. Slowly. In ways that actually mattered. He started sharing the house without being asked, cooking some nights, handling the school run on others, learning which light setting Ben needed and which song got Jack to sleep, badly, off-key, every single time. He asked Amy, honestly, what she wanted for herself, instead of deciding for her. When she mentioned carefully, like she still expected to be laughed at, that she still thought about that plot of land they'd once planned on a napkin, he didn't dismiss it. I still have the napkin, he admitted. It's in a box in the garage. I never threw it out. I just stopped looking at it. You kept it? I kept it. He started looking at listings that weekend, and this time he asked her to come look with him instead of deciding what she'd want. At work, people noticed the difference too. He left on time now, stopped falling asleep in meetings, actually laughed at things instead of just looking exhausted through them. A colleague asked him once what had changed. Nothing changed, Frank said. I just finally noticed what was already happening at home. Months passed. Amy healed not because anyone pressured her to, but because for the first time since the boys were born, she had actual support holding half the weight instead of criticism adding to it. She started sleeping through the nights. She started laughing at things that weren't about the kids. She started slowly becoming someone who recognized her own reflection again. On a bright Saturday, almost a year later, Amy stood in the middle of 2 acres of turned soil, an early spring color, rows of dahlias the size of dinner plates stretching out toward the tree line. The same flowers her grandmother used to grow. The same ones she used to doodle in the margins of budget meetings a lifetime ago. Tom, Ben, and Jack ran between the rows, shrieking with laughter, utterly unbothered by the dirt on their knees. Frank stood a few steps behind her, holding a water can she'd handed him without asking, waiting for instructions instead of giving them for once. He'd learned, slowly, that this was where he belonged now, not out front, not narrating, just close enough to help when she needed it and quiet enough to let her have the rest. Amy knelt down, brushed her hand across a row of just opened blooms, and smiled, not the careful, tired smile she'd worn for 6 years, but something looser, something that belonged only to her. "These are ready," she said, more to herself than to him. "They are beautiful," Frank said quietly. "I know," Amy said, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't asking anyone to agree with her. She just knew it, the way she used to know things back when she still recognized herself in the mirror every morning. Behind her, the boys kept running through the rows, and somewhere past the tree line, the light was doing the thing it did every evening, now turning gold, slow, unhurried, like it finally had somewhere worth staying. Sometimes we get so busy measuring our lives against someone else's highlight reel that we forget to ask what's actually happening behind their closed doors and what it's costing the person standing right in front of us. A marriage isn't a scoreboard. It's not one person carrying the weight while the other one keeps count of what's missing. It's two people picking up whatever the other one can't carry that day, without being asked, without needing a crisis first. If this story hit home for you, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because new stories like this one drop every week and you won't want to miss the next one. And if you're still here, drop a comment and let me know. I read every single one and I want to hear what you have to say. Now I want to hear from you. If you were Amy, would you have given Frank a second chance, or was 1 week of struggling not nearly enough to earn back 4 years of comparison? Do you think Frank truly changed, or do people like him only change when it's convenient? And have you ever felt like you were being compared to someone whose whole situation you never really saw? Tell me in the comments, I read every single one.